Northwest London desperately needs better links with West London. Getting between the two is painfully slow and often involves lots of buses, congestion, or long trips through central London. But how can an unused freight line fix what the Superloop couldn't? What does High Speed 2 have to do with this, and how cheap can you build an overground line for?
Right, we all know that getting from Northwest to West London isn't very fun. There just isn't a direct link between these parts of the city. Sure, there's the Superloop, but that involves change at Harrow and goes into Heathrow, skipping a lot of important areas near the airport.
Trips from Wembley, Hurlston, Brent Cross and Cricklewood toward Brentford, Isleworth and Hounslow are just painfully slow. The North Circular is literally the most congested road in the country.
Buses are slow and unreliable and often require a change. Yes, that includes the Superloop. This just isn't ideal for parts of London that have lots of potential for much needed housing to be built and are areas with lots of employment. Brentford, Isleworth and Hounslow are big employment centres. However, like much of London, housing is in really short supply here.
But in northwest London, there actually is lots of potential for new housing to be built.
And potential for lots more with improved transport links, especially around Old Oak, Brent Cross, and Wembley. And anyway, all of these areas already have lots of existing homes and jobs. Directly connecting them just makes complete sense. It's clear that something needs to be done.
But there actually is a proper heavy rail line being proposed. The West London Orbital.
Now, I'm pretty sure that most of you already know roughly what it is. It's been talked about for quite some time now. But anyway, the line would run from both Hendon and West Hampstead Thameslink on the Midland Main Line to just above Cricklewood.
Here, trains would join onto an already existing freight line, the Dudding-Kill line, which would take them through Neaston, Woolston, Hurlston and Acton, then onto the Mildmay line, right next to Old Oak Common, right here.
Trains would share this track until South Acton, where they'd use an already existing curve of track to join the Hounslow Loop on the South Western Railway until Hounslow. Connecting Brent Cross and Hounslow alone is very important and would probably justify this service on its own. However, it's actually the interchanges that this line allows that makes it so important. Of course, starting off at the top of the line, Thameslink serves all of the Midland mainline stations. If we really wanted, we could get EMR trains to stop at Brent Cross West too. The platforms for that exist, and there's a lot of development in that area, so probably not a bad idea. The West London Orbital would then also connect to the Jubilee line at Neasden, and the Bakerloo and Lioness lines at Hurlston, the Mildmay line at both Acton stations, then of course the South Western Railway at all of the Hounslow Loop stations, with the twice-hourly service from Waterloo to Weybridge. But where this line is really important is at Old Oak Common. Old Oak Common is going to be a station on High Speed 2. In case you've been living under a rock, High Speed 2 is a new high-speed line being built from London to Birmingham to increase capacity on the very busy West Coast Main Line, and hopefully Manchester sometime in the next 1,000 years. But anyway, High Speed 2 will have a new station at Old Oak Common, and this station is gonna be big. Elizabeth Line trains, the Heathrow Express, and all Great Western Railway services will stop here, meaning this station is going to become a very significant interchange for passengers travelling between the north, the west, Heathrow Airport, and central London. The West London Orbital passes just across the road from here, where of course it will have a station. This will bring a huge area of North and West London into the catchment of High Speed 2, and would mean that a lot of Brentford, Hounslow, Hurlston and Cricklewood would only be slightly more than an hour from Birmingham, opening up even more opportunities for housing and employment. A lot of the areas that the West London Orbital will serve don't currently have easy access to intercity rail. Thameslink will get you as far as Bedford on the Midland Main Line, and the South Western Railway can get you to Weybridge, but other than that, any sort of intercity trip is going to require travelling into central London. The West London Orbital will mean that all of these areas have easy access to the Great Western Main Line, High Speed 2, the Midland Main Line, and Heathrow Airport via the Elizabeth Line, making trips to other parts of the UK so much easier. And this is a big part of the reason why the West London Orbital has a cost-to-benefit ratio of 2.2. The benefits that this line would bring to the areas it serves are huge for a line that costs so little to build. Something else that costs very little is becoming a channel member. That way you can help support the channel and get your name on screen right here. Or you can subscribe for free and never miss out on new videos. We also have a Discord server, links in the description for that. Right, where were we? So why exactly is it so cheap? The West London Orbital, of course. As you might have guessed from the beginning of this video, almost all of the infrastructure for this line already exists. It's a really easy build. There's no expensive tunneling or buying lots of land, which is honestly very impressive to have right in London. This service could be set up for very little money as far as railways go. It's about the same cost as renaming the Overground lines about 100 times. Right, so what does need to happen? The Dudding Hill line needs to be electrified and re-signaled, as it's currently only set up for a couple freight trains a day. It's still using semaphore signals somehow.
Acton Wells Junction would need to be rebuilt too. It's currently very busy with freight trains and existing Maldmay lines. In order to run more trains, some new tracks would need to be laid.
Then of course, new stations would need to be built. The line would have new stations at Neasden, Harlesden, Old Oak Common Lane, and Lionel Road, and all of the Midland mainline stations would need new platforms. And of course at Hounslow we would need a siding to turn around trains at. Then for the 11 trains that would operate this service, a depot would need to be built at Willesden Southwest sidings, which is currently not used. These are pretty straightforward. Where things are a little more messy though is how the trains should be powered. Trains would either be dual voltage electric trains, much like what already exists on the rest of the Overground network, or they would run partially on battery. Either way, the Dudding Hill line clearly needs to be electrified, as even if we get battery trains, they would need to charge as they run on this section of track. And anyway, this is a step in the right direction when it comes to electrifying freight trains. Electrifying up here would also be a nice excuse to fill in some gaps in electrification around Willesden Junction on the West Coast Main Line, which would help out with moving stuff around, and again, would be a step in the right direction for electrifying freight. I'm not going to go too far into the details of battery trains because I've already made a video about them. But having dual voltage trains would mean that you maintain fleet commonality across the entire Overground, and we can make use of the third rail that's already there for most of the southern end of the route. The electric supply would need to be upgraded in the Hounslow Loop area, but I'd say that this is worth it. But yeah, that's all about electrification. The only other issues that need to be addressed are the 3 level crossings along the route. Because of the extra trains the West London Orbital would bring to these lines, the level crossings would be closed far too often and for far too long. There just isn't space to put in a road bridge at any of the level crossings, but honestly, we can squeeze in a footbridge and just close the crossings. Most of these roads don't see heavy traffic, and anyway, the alternative routes aren't that bad. In fact, the areas around some of these level crossings would be better off with them closed, as that would mean quieter, safer streets around the stations. One of the level crossings at Bolo Lane would need to stay open, however, to allow the 70 bus into the business park, but this is on the Maldmay line and not the West London Orbital, so that shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, there aren't really any serious problems on the West London Orbital route. Everything has a reasonable solution and it's a pretty cheap line to build. So I'd say it's about time that we start building this line.
Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed that video, and yeah, I'll see us next time. Bye. Subscribe.